Hello, everybody, and welcome to the show. I'm back here with Josh Denny. We're going to have that's Denny, Josh Denny, not Danny. And we're going to be discussing some more Gurdjieff. And our subject tonight is worlds. And Gurdjieff talks a lot about worlds, this world, other worlds, and whatever world you're living on. So, Josh, what would you say about worlds from the Gurdjieff point of view?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, I suppose, like, again, it's, there's lots of similarities between the different traditions. So it's not just, I suppose, like, limited to Gurdjieff's ideas, but there's a lot of crossovers between the different, different systems. But yeah, definitely Gurdjieff says that, let's say then reality is composed of different worlds, or we might even use the word, I suppose, cosmoses. That's another kind of a word for world or domain that, that are different. And he often talks about the different worlds as having sort of like different laws, that operate in the different world, and thereby give the world, that particular world, a different nature or different possibilities. So I suppose, like, again, sort of a rough gist, we could maybe look at sort of an idea of three worlds, and the sort of, I suppose, the first world that we, again, most, I suppose, in his ideas, most people tend to live in, we could call it the physical world, I suppose. But again, that's a kind of a rough, I suppose, a sort of a rough definition. Because again, the worlds, I suppose, they really kind of, I suppose, like to subjective experience, they correspond to, like, yeah, modes, you could say modes of consciousness or worlds of experience. So they're not really, I suppose, like, obviously they don't really refer to sort of like external objects. They're more, you could say, like, yeah, states or worlds of consciousness, I guess, or experience.
Yeah, because
So
I
the
think the
general,
first thing people think of when you say worlds is planet Earth,
yeah,
on the ground. But yeah, like you're right, there's different types of worlds. Sorry, interrupt you.
yeah, no, it's all right. Yeah, yeah. I mean, obviously, yeah, it's our general kind of thinking, and this goes along with the idea of the sort of the world that people tend to occupy. But our general kind of thinking, I suppose, is sort of it's physically based. We tend to think about things or subjects, ideas, with a kind of thinking that's based sort of in the world of physicality, in the world of objects. So, like, if we talk about, if the idea of different worlds is brought up, we, the mind might create a picture of these sort of like different objects in the mind, like there's this little circle over here is one world, then another circle over there, for another world. So yeah, the idea of worlds, where we can often think about it, is kind of limited to our normal sort of mode of thinking, which is kind of, you could call it objective, but when I mean objective, I mean it tends to think of, things and subjects in terms of, like, yeah, objects, that our normal kind of thinking in a way is sort of a mirror of our experience of, you could say, then the physical world, or the world of objects. I mean, obviously that our normal kind of thinking is fine for, dealing with the physical world and, day-to-day events and stuff. It's perfectly able for that, for dealing with that world. But that kind of thought, you could say, is inappropriate when trying to, like, think of, let's say, other worlds or higher worlds then. So yeah, the general, you could say, the world of our experience, or the world that maybe most people appear to spend most of their time in, is a kind of, yeah, you could call it a kind of objective world, in the sense that it operates by the appearance of objects. And that's the kind of mode of consciousness that is present in that sort of world, or that first world, is a kind of our normal, I suppose, subject object consciousness. So we experience ourselves from as a certain center of experience, a subject who experiences themselves in relation to, or you could equally say separate from, all the other objects, let's say, then in that physical world, in the subject object world. So that sort of, call it the physical world then, or the world of the general sort of subject object consciousness, is always split up, you could say, like, I mean, it's always experienced from a sort of localized center or vantage point. And it's also kind of time, you could say, it's also time based, that sort of general form of consciousness experience is what we, our normal experience or conception of time as sort of like a linear series of events. So in that sort of first world of experience, yeah, we experience objects which are separate from other objects. So, like, the normal idea of, I suppose, three-dimensional space. and we experience a certain kind of form of time in the sense of what we would normally call linear causality. So you could say that's a kind of a sort of a dominant thread in the first world is this sort of sense of location, like being an object, a spatial object in a world of other objects, and in a world in which this sort of linear causality applies, and events and objects are separated from other events and objects. So I would say that that's the kind of, could call it the first world, or that's maybe the general world that sort of most people tend to experience. And that's the world again that if we're centered in that world, and obviously if we're thinking about higher worlds or trying to, then we're going to tend to project, the experience of that world into higher worlds. You see what I mean? We're going to project our given experience of the first world into our attempts to conceive or think about these other worlds.
But where are these higher worlds?
Well, aware, again, aware sort of suggests, do you know, see what I mean? I mean, we're limited again to like normal language, and you might begin to see that normal language itself is geared to this sort of first world. It's geared towards dealing with objects that are separate from other objects, and and causality. So our normal language is geared for this, like physical world, but it starts to break down or become evidently limited when again we try to conceive of higher worlds, because you could say, yeah, these higher worlds, they aren't anywhere, because aware, sort of suggests a location, like in space. So that's what I meant. You could look at the other worlds as realms of experience, let's say, or consciousness that we can experience or could become centered in. You could say that they're here, those higher worlds are here all the time, but we don't tend to, you could say, experience them or recognize them for what they are, because we're sort of more focused on this sort of first world, or this kind of, you could call it the physical world. Our consciousness is more sort of centered in that first world. So those higher worlds can appear sort of screened for us. And again, in Gurdjieff's terms, you could link those sort of three worlds to his idea of three bodies. Like we have our physical body, and through that we experience, like I said, this sort of physical, physical world of other physical bodies and sort of physical, time and space. But then he suggested again that we have other bodies, like a Kesdjian body, which he kind of links to the astral body. And so you could say, well, that body then is the body that is used for experiencing, and you could say navigating the second world, which we could call the Kesdjian world or the astral world. And then he says we have a third body, which he calls like the soul, which would be, the body of the third world, or that we would use to sort of access and kind of navigate, the third world. But again, you can see that the term body itself can be quite, a limited term, in the sense that people might assume that those higher bodies are just sort of like, analogous to, or like another kind of body, like a physical body, with like a certain shape and size. But obviously, if they're talking about a different world, then a body that sort of occupies that different world obviously would have a very different nature. The sort of term body kind of again would sort of break down in terms of our normal understanding of it, for our normal sort of thinking and language. But then if we talk about the second world, or try to, we could say that, yeah, okay, then we could call it the astral world or the Kesdjian world, or also we could use the term being, I suppose. We could call it a world of being, or maybe even in his terms, essence. Like again, he talks about people, as having essences, or we could talk about the human essence, just in the same way as we could speak about, I don't know, like the essence of plants or the essence of animals, or a particular, species of animals. So you could say that in the second world, call it the Kesdjian world or the astral world, experience, if you kind of have an experience of that nature, then obviously it will be different to your sort of normal everyday physical experience. And like we were saying, it's a different kind of laws apply, or it's a different, you could call a different kind of environment. So a hallmark, you could say, of the Kesdjian world or the second world is that there's not the same form of separation then, let's say, between beings that are in that world or that occupy that world. Again, like if I'm just, say, situated at the physical world, then if I'm looking at a tree, let's say, I kind of really only perceive its sort of physical appearance, it's sort of outer surface, you could say. It's external nature, it's physical nature. And again, I experience that through my physical senses. And part of that experience is that the trees, I kind of experience it as separate from me and as a kind of, object, experience it as another object in relation to myself as a kind of an object, And I might have certain.
Oh, sorry, I'm going to interrupt and tell you about when my friend's little girl was only 2 years old. She used to stroke what my friend was saying was the auras of the trees. So
Yeah.
that little girl's still living in essence, isn't she? And that's why she could still see and feel them auras of them trees. Well, we've
Yeah,
run
yeah,
out of that, sadly. But that's why Gurdjieff is trying to teach us to develop our essence.
yeah. You could say that as kids, we're definitely, it doesn't appear to take long to sort of for us to come out of that, or for essence to become more sort of in the background, less sort of noticed. It doesn't seem to take very long for our consciousness to shift to the sort of, call it the physical world then. But yeah, definitely you could say that very young kids are more in tune with essence. But as soon as we start to, you could say, gain language and, and that kind of interaction, you could say, like the development of self-consciousness, you could say that we kind of come out of it, essence, or that world gets a bit screened, or like he might say, it kind of becomes shifted to our sort of subconsciousness. Again, it's not that it goes anywhere, but our consciousness kind of becomes more orientated towards the physical world. You could look at it maybe partially as a natural kind of process, that it makes sense that we as children might need to become more physically focused or orientated in the physical world to sort of gain the physical capacities that we would need to become independent physical beings and, be able to talk with other humans and look after ourselves in the physical world. So it would make sense that, we would sort of develop a bit more of a physical consciousness or become slightly more shifted to the physical world. But again, he says that the kind of modern Western society produces much more of a limitation or much more of a focus on the physical world than maybe is natural to us. Maybe more natural societies, we wouldn't lose so much of the essence. You might say that we would still have to gain a bit of physical consciousness. The child sort of has to come a bit more into that physical world. But yeah, maybe in more sort of natural circumstance, we wouldn't lose quite as much of a connection, with the essence. But yeah, as I was saying, in the physical world, I just look at the tree and I kind of just see it as an object that is separate to me. And I might have some sense of its sort of being, that I look at the tree, and some part of me might kind of have a sense that it is a living being, it's like, a living organism. But it can often just remain as a sort of a vague sense or maybe a sort of emotional feeling. It doesn't generally kind of become a sort of like evident, stark, direct experience of like me, say, contacting or experiencing or interacting with the essence or the being of the tree. So you could say that if your consciousness starts to shift more into, let's say, then the Keston world, that let's say if I'm looking at a tree from that world, I'm not experiencing it as a separate object to myself. It would be a direct, you could say, contact of being. Again, it's a strange term, but it would be more like, I'm going to have to use like limited metaphors, but it'd be like you could know the tree, like the essence of the tree, the being of the tree, by its direct contact with your own being. And there wouldn't really be any separation in that sense. Like a contact of being would be like almost, I suppose, almost imagine like the tree coming into your being, or like it'd be like an interpermeation. Like,
Yeah, and you'll be going into the tree. It's quite beautiful, actually, isn't it? To think if we could be able to do that, if we had developed our bodies enough, our essence enough.
Yeah, I mean, you could say that that's happening it's there happening all the time, but it tends to just remain in our sort of subconsciousness. But I'm just saying that kind of experience then, or let's say the interaction between me and the tree in the Keston world, it doesn't have that same form of sort of separation or distance or mediation that operates in the physical world. Like in the physical world, the tree is separate to me you could say by very virtue of the physical nature, by virtue of me experiencing it kind of, you could say, through my senses. That immediately kind of puts it at a distance because I'm sort of experiencing it, you could say, like secondhand, or there's a middleman involved in, you could say, the physical world. So I only experience the tree sort of at a distance or through this like secondary means of my senses and physical body. But in the world of being, it's direct. There isn't like any contact then between essences in that world. There isn't any like, it's a direct contact. Do you see what I mean? There isn't any separation. So like I would know the tree, you could say, by being the tree almost.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that contact of being is like, it's intimate. You could use a sexual metaphor for it. Like in the physical world, we can get, that's about as close as we can sort of get to that kind of interpermeation, like through physical sex. And you could say, like, you know, because as you might know yourself, in that experience of physical sex with an intimate lover, there can be an apparent kind of like breaking down of the supposed separation. You can kind of like, you could say merge, you know, or the essence, your essence and the essence of the person you're making love with can kind of become one, or you can know each other. Again, they kind of use that word in the Bible, which I think is pretty good. Like they don't often speak of sex. He says, you know, it says that such and such knew such and such a person. So it's like that. It's like a knowing, an intimate knowing of the essence, or direct. But yeah, that's what I mean. In that world, it's any contact, you could say, between essences or beings. It's direct, and you know it by being. Like it's like in order to know the tree, then in the world of being, you have to be the tree, or vice versa. There's that kind of.
I think a lot of people are looking for that connection now, and that's why there's so much, you know, casual sex and things like that. They've misunderstood what it is that they're trying to, because they're looking for that high. It's the highest high, isn't it? And
yeah, but it's definitely the world of essence is it's a very, you know, compared to our normal sort of realm of experience, it's much more intense. And yeah, you could say it's naturally kind of joyous, you know, like essence is, yeah, it's very, you know, I mean, essence, again, the word itself, essence, is very suggestive, isn't it? It suggests like a kind of intensity and a sort of purity, and also, yeah, like a quality, you know, it's quite, obviously comparatively, you could say that the world of essence is much more real than the world of like physicality, you know. So again, if your experiences shift, if your consciousness becomes more shifted to that sort of world, then yeah, it's likely that your experiences will be more intense.
I think a lot of people find that hard to get their heads round, though, because we live in such a physical world, and obviously very rational world as well, because it's a leap forward, isn't it? It's a leap of faith in some ways. But once you start working on this and seeing this and experiencing this, you realize what you're saying is true.
Yeah, I mean, again, another way to possibly open to it is through the emotional nature. Like in Gurdjieff's terms, you could say the essence from the average person's normal position, a way to get to it is kind of through the emotional center, because you could say that second world of essence is it's kind of centered in you could say the feelings, you know, and obviously the feelings have a quite different nature to our ordinary sort of kind of realm of thinking and thought, you know. Like you could say that obviously our feelings are generally experienced as kind of more intimate, you know, is more intimate to us than a thought. You know, I could have a thought about something, but if I have a feeling, it's a bit more vibrant, and there isn't this kind of same separation that I might have. You know, I can think about a subject, but like thinking about love, let's say, that is quite different to the emotional experience of love. You know, comparatively, just thinking about love can seem dry, and yeah, obviously we might say theoretical, whereas the evident sort of emotional experience of love, you know, it's very intense. It's very intense in comparison to just a thought about it, you know. So again, you could say that a way to get to that, possibly then, or to shift our consciousness, could be through our emotional center. Like again, if I look at the tree, I can try to maybe like feel it. Again, it's just a suggestive term, but try to feel the being of the tree. And also, like I suppose color is another one. There is that idea that sort of color and kind of texture. Again, although we are sort of experiencing it through the physical senses, it's often suggested that color and texture are kind of you could say a way in, or they're also like a representation of the world of the essence. Like, there's a particular reason why let's say then the leaves of some tree are green, or why some like a roses might be red or whatever. Like they say that those colors are kind of an expression of an essence quality, so you could draw your attention to maybe like the sort of try to feel the texture, let's say then, of the tree, like as you look at it, try and like feel, say, its leaves or the shape of it and its color, so you can kind of open to a sort of an emotional, like the perception of your emotional center, you could say, and that that can kind of lead you into, like, you could say, an essence experience. And so you can, again, like looking at the tree, if you sort of contact its essence, you will be having the sense that you have a sense that you're engaging with another being, like it is a, you know, it's got its own kind of consciousness, its own essence. But that world of the Kesner world isn't so. There is like there is content in it, in the world of essence, but so you could say there are forms, like the essence of a tree. There's a certain form there, but it's not. They're not kind of like physical forms. You know, it'd be closer to maybe like something that we might equate to a dream state. You know, like you could have dreams where like the sense of, you know, it could be slightly more abstract, if you see what I'm saying. It's not like forms in the world of essence, they're not the same as physical forms, so they can be a bit more, you might say, amorphous, let's say, or something like that.
Someone was saying to me that sometimes they're like the Salvador Dali paintings.
Yeah, you can, again, like, or like, you know, you can look at some pictures like by Blake and stuff like that. You can say that they're all William Blake, that they're attempts to try to convey experiences of the astral realm. But obviously, if you're trying to convey it in a picture, you know, you're kind of limited to what you can do. But even looking at those pictures or looking at some artwork, you can get a feeling, you know, like say like a Van Gogh picture, you know, like some of his pictures of sunny days or like hayfields. What he's trying, you could say, trying to capture is the kind of perception of the essence, you know, which is very vibrant, you know, and vivid. And you can get a sense of that. Like, you know, if you look at if I look at some of his pictures and say it's like they're almost more real, you can have like almost a more real experience than you would if you were standing in an actual hayfield, you could say,
Yeah.
because they're like there's so much essence, you could say, that's captured or that's attempted to be captured in the picture, you know. So again, that kind of essence world is almost more, you know, almost more real, you could say, and vibrant than the physical world. But again, they're not two separate worlds. It's like the world of essence is, I suppose, take the idea of gross and subtle. You could say that the essence world is more subtle than the gross physical world. Therefore, it kind of contains the physical world and sort of permeates it. Do you see what I mean? So it's like just behind the veil of, if you like, the physical senses, there is always the subtle sort of world there. You know, there's not like a strict boundary between the sensory world and, let's say, the world of essence. So yeah, I was going to say that, yeah, the form of experience in the essence world will be quite different, and it's a contact of kind of being, and also that there isn't the same kind of, you could say, like causality or like linear time that operates in that sort of second world. And again, that you can link like another typical experience that people can have is dreams. Like you can recognize possibly in your dreams that there can be a different kind of order of time. Like I suppose people might have the example, say that you're asleep and then you, like, your alarm went off or something and you wake up, and then maybe, you know, you kind of fall back asleep and you have what seems to be a really long dream experience, and then you kind of open your eyes again, and maybe only a minute has passed on the physical clock. You know, you might have had a dream that seemed like months, perhaps.
Do you
So
think there is time in that world, in that dream world, spiritual world?
in the second world, I say there is a kind of time, but it's just very different to like physical time. It's not like the normal form of linear causality. Like, you know what I mean? Like in the physical world, I have to, like, I don't know, I have to cook the chicken before I can eat it. You know, there's certain sequences that have to go in order. But in the second world, like, it's like, you know, I could eat the chicken before I cooked it or something like that. Do you see what I'm saying? Like there isn't that same limitation of having to follow the same order of processes. And again, that's kind of why we can have prophecy and clairvoyance, is because you could say that there's a different order of time in the second world. You know, like you could say that something like effects come before causes in the second world, something like that. Again, they're just like, you know, they're just physical terms trying to point to the difference there. Like, yeah, effects could come before causes in that sort of second world. And yeah, like the second world is, again, we talked about as the astral world and world of spirits, or like we said, essences. So you could say that second world is the same world where, like, it's populated by, you could say, essences or spirits, and it's the same kind of world of, like, what we might say like fairies or you know, goblins, or I don't know, unicorns. You could say that all pardon?
The little folk and the mystical, mythical
Yeah, yeah,
creatures.
all that is present, like you know, in the kind of second world. Like, so again, I mean, it just comes to mind. I remember, I think it was just on TV. I saw a program, and it was in Ireland, you know, the program, and there was some bush, I think, somewhere in Ireland, and you know, the council wanted to put a road, like a motorway, you know, through, and they were going to like you know, have to cut this bush down, but people like protested because it was kind of known as a like, or had a reputation of being like a kind of a fairy, you know, like as if it was inhabited by sort of fairies. And I remember like just on the instant that the TV program kind of shot to the bush, I remember having like a direct impression. You know, again, it's kind of a, it's not kind of in a sense with the physical senses. It's kind of a bit more, you could say, with your mind's eye, kind of. But it was obvious. I just saw that it was kind of inhabited by, like, you could call it like spiritual beings if you want. But that again, that all that world is real. But it's, to kind of access it, you could say you need to be in an altered state of consciousness, or it's accessed through the kind of perception of you could say your essence then, or like Keston body then, if you want to put it that way. All those kind of things are, you could say, real, all those different spirits and stuff, but they occupy that that second world. And again, that second world is also, like, you could say, what people are generally sort of dealing with in the case of like mediums and psychics. You could say, you know, like, you could say a person who's more tapped in, let's say, to the second world, can meet someone, and just on like, just at the first glance at meeting them, it's possible that you could kind of know their essence. Like, you might get some, like, again, it's a kind of a direct sort of knowledge. So you can kind of have an essence contact, which means because you kind of know their essence. Now that might, other data might come with that, like maybe experiences of that person's life, you know, things they've gone through. But so that can come, that kind of secondary data can come, but it's the knowledge of the essence is kind of primary. It's a direct contact, and you could say in itself, it doesn't have like any sort of pictorial, you know, image kind of content to it in a way. Like, again, people might report sort of experiences. Let's say that one of your family, like a close, say your brother or something, or sister, died, and people might report, you know, like say he died a few days ago or something, and then people might be just at home, you know, doing something, and then suddenly they might have the intense like sense or experience that let's say their brother or sister was here with them. Let's say then,
Yeah.
but they wouldn't necessarily. Pardon?
Yeah, I've experienced that. Yeah.
Yeah, they wouldn't necessarily have to be any. There could be visual, like you might see, but even that secondary, that level of vision is not necessarily necessary. Like, you could just have that direct sense of contact, that like, oh right, my brother's here now. And again, in that experience itself, it doesn't really leave any room for doubt. You could say it's just obvious, and that's what I meant by the sense that it's a kind of a knowledge of your essence. You see what I mean? Like, you know that it's your brother without having to like necessarily see. Do you see what I mean? See him with, like, you could say, with physical eyes, or with it. You don't need any form necessarily to appear to know it's your brother. So that's what I'm saying. That kind of essence knowledge, it's not dependent on any particular physical appearance. Yeah, or any kind of image. There can be images in that there are images and forms in that world, but you could say that kind of knowledge, the essence knowledge, it's not limited to that. It's a direct kind of, you could say, knowledge. Like, again, you know your brother. Like, it's almost like something like in trying to use analogies, you could say, like, you know his smell, or you know his taste. Do you see what I mean? Like, in the same way you know the smell of an orange without having to see an orange. You're like, all right, that smells like orange, you know. So you could say the world of essence is like that. You know, it's a direct kind of knowledge. And, like, you could say relatively or comparatively, yeah, that second world compared to the physical world kind of seems timeless, because, again, it has a kind of different nature to it, or it can, you know, comparatively it can seem timeless, in the same way that you could say, well, you know, the essence of a sheep is the essence of a sheep, and it will always be the essence of a sheep, kind of eternally so, you know. So in that sense, the essence of sheepness, you could say, is not time dependent, you know. Although, of course, in the physical world, sheeps come and go, and their bodies undergo, you know, physical change, birth and decay, but the essence of sheep remains the same, you know. So in that sense, you could say that the sort of world of essence is kind of eternal and timeless. But in terms of engaging with it and like experiences of it, you could say there is a kind of time, but it's just again, it's not kind of like physical time, because again, you could still say there are events in a sense in the in the second world, but again, that the word event there obviously kind of points to something different than what we experience as events in, you know, in the physical world, you know, because obviously if we're talking about sort of essences aren't objects, or they're not like bodies in the same way of physical objects and physical bodies. So, you know, if we talk about events in a world that's non-physical, it's kind of hard for our normal physical mind, you know, to try to picture that, because our physical mind can only sort of think about that in terms of, you know, some sort of like objects that are moving around in some kind of space, you see.
Yeah, it's
So
very hard to get your head around it and your mind around it.
yeah, like you can't really get your like the normal sort of thinking mind, you know, you can't really understand it. You're just limited to whether you know, you have experiences of it. Like I said, you couldn't, you say with your experience of a dead person you know, being present in the room with you, you can't really, you can attempt to describe that, what that was like to someone, but obviously you know that the words, they can't really convey the nature of that experience. You know, it's not kind of subject to the normal kind of rationality or logic, which is the same way about like it's a different world that are subject to different laws. Do you know what I mean? There's a kind of almost like a different, like a different kind of knowledge that operates in each world, then, or in the second world. And also, like I say,
Oh, sorry, guys. I wanted to tell you a little story. Actually, they seem to interact with our world though, because I
yeah,
remember when I was making my first series of Beelzebub's Towers videos with my models and my caricatures of the characters. I finished editing one of my films and I found someone, no one was there, tapping me on the back of my head.
yeah,
And I'm pretty sure it was Mr. Gurdjieff. I'd like to think it was.
it
When I
could
looked
be.
up, I was spelling Beelzebub on uh, the credits. And he would want protection, wouldn't he, Mr. Gurdjieff? So I think that it was him saying to me, "All right, come on, Debbie, get it right."
Yeah. Why not? Yeah, definitely. But definitely though, they're like I'm saying, it's not like there's a solid boundary between, let's say, then the physical world and the essence world. You know, because obviously, if I'm looking at a tree, you know, in the physical world, then that physical tree is an expression of the essence or the being of tree. So again, like it's like the spirit world in the second world interpermeates, you know, the physical world, and you could say the physical world is an expression, you know, of the spirit world. It's just the physical world is the external world, it's the external counterpart to the world of the essence, which is like the inner, you know, the inner world. So what we see in the physical world, physical bodies, they're like, yeah, a materialized, physicalized expression of the world of the essence. You know, they're two halves of like the same coin. So they're not like, you know, it's not like a physical boundary between the two, but the boundary tends to operate in terms of our experience. That's what I mean. Like we can seem to be veiled from or separated from the world of the essence. But that's, again, just kind of due to how our consciousness has come to be kind of more focused on the physical world. Like, again, through our sort of the conditions of the modern world and all its kind of rationality and our education system and stuff, it's all geared to the physical world. So we kind of get pushed out of that as kids, you know, like the demands are made on us to, like, you know, pay attention and blah, 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 and learn this and that. So, you know, we kind of get brought down into you could say brought down, or just our focus gets more, you know, exclusively orientated to the physical world. So there can be a kind of a sense of a loss of that contact, or you know, if when people might hear other people talking about the spirit world, it might seem to them that something that's not part of their experience, but really, again, they are experiencing it all the time. It can just be in the background or not really recognized for what it is, you know. Because again, you could say that any of your feeling states, and also you could say really any of your thoughts or even imagination, you know, that is an expression of the spirit world, you know. And like, again, you'll often maybe hear about like William Blake or others talking about the use of like creative imagination as a way to engage with the spirit world, you see. So like, yeah, your very stuff of thoughts and feeling is kind of an expression, or is made of the same stuff of the second world. And in Gurdjieff terms, that's why we can work with, let's say, thought, feeling, and also physical sensation to develop, let's say, then our second body or essence, or can develop our means of contact and experience, perception of that second world.
Yeah, constructive imagination.
Yeah, yeah. But again, just like any imagination, I mean, a constructive use of it can give us more, can transform our kind of spiritual senses. We can exercise our thoughts and feelings. Like you can imagine let's say, our mind and our emotional center, mental emotional centers as means for perceiving, let's say, the spiritual world. But they just kind of tend to remain sort of, you could say, undeveloped, or just like they're a bit clouded over. So we don't we don't recognize, we don't kind of see what's there, in the mental and emotional worlds. We kind of experience it as sort of watered down, or again, our attention seems to be more shifted to the physical world, the world of the senses. So we have a limited form of contact with the mental and emotional worlds, which you could say are an expression of the sort of spirit world. Like they say, don't they, that kind of every child in a sense undergoes a kind of a trauma, like being born into the physical world and growing up, and so we undergo shocks, and we kind of become just sort of dictated by the physical survival instincts. You see what I mean? Like our attention is, even if I'm just sitting here, my attention might be constantly, in a sense, being distracted, you could say, or just kind of focused on what's going around me, the noises, in the room and stuff, because we're on edge. You could say we've been taught or learned fear, or physical preservation, like fight or flight is kind of, the fight or flight instincts are always running in the background. So that kind of keeps us bound, you could say, or our attention bound to the kind of physical nature. So that creates a barrier. You see what I mean? Like we find it hard to be in the physical world, but also allow our attention to kind of go into the, you could say, the astral, or the Keston world.
Yeah, it's weird how we operate like that, though, isn't it? Which is what Gurdjieff's trying to guide us or navigate us through.
Yeah, you could say that we're always kind of a bit, you could say, on edge. So that keeps our attention sort of physically bound, because we're a bit, kind of fearful, and we always tend to be, you might say, like self-critical or self-judgmental, like, or maybe even afraid. Like in a way, we've kind of learned to be kind of fear ourselves, that so we don't, there's a kind of resistance to like fully seeing, you could say, what's inside us in our mind or in our feelings. We're kind of maybe a bit afraid to see something that we don't want to see,
Yeah.
So that kind of, that shuts it out a bit. You see what I mean? That kind of brings a resistance that stops our kind of mental and emotional centers, or like imagine there's like organs of perception or eyes. It stops our eyes from kind of opening to that, to that world. And again, there are certain practices that, like all these, exercises and things that we can do in different traditions, meditation and stuff, like that can all be a kind of a partial help, possibly, to gaining more access to that world of essence. But in a sense, that the development of that second body is a natural process, much like, the child, the baby, it's a natural process for the baby to grow. You can't force the baby to grow, or you can't like give the baby a technique, like say, practice this technique and you'll grow. All you can do as a parent is like provide them with food, nourishment, and certain conditions, and that can enable the baby, to grow. But it's a natural process. So the development of the essence is like that. It's another natural process. You can't you can't really like teach it. It's something that has to kind of flower of itself. All that people can do is try different things, or possibly be exposed to different teachings and practices and stuff and ideas, and hopefully that kind of natural sort of like flowering, can happen. But then if we move on to the third world, then like if that, the Keston world is sort of second world, the world of essence, then he calls it, the world of soul. And I suppose maybe in other terms, we could kind of link it in a way to the core, what some terminologies might call the causal world. And in a sense that by very nature of that being causal, you could say it's the realm that causes, the other realms, let's say then the spirit world and the physical world, to have the nature that they do. You could say in a sort of rough hierarchical sense, you could say, well, then that causal world is higher, so to speak, or more foundational, and the spirit world, the Kesdran world, and the physical world are dependent on that causal world. They kind of, you could imagine maybe like something like the blueprint, is held in the causal world, and that can unfold into like the second world, the Kesdran world, and the physical world. Like that sort of blueprint unfolds, becomes manifest in those two lower worlds. But obviously that would mean then in itself that causal world, it doesn't really have any, like if you could say if a person comes into contact with it or their consciousness shifts to that kind of realm, there's no content in it. There's no forms. Like in the second world there are forms, there is a content to it, although they are kind of very different to the physical like forms and the physical content of experience. But in that sort of third world there isn't really any content, and yet it's the world that shapes all the other two worlds, or any content is kind of a cause. And I suppose an idea, another word that we could use for it is like, you could say it's the realm of law. That's the realm where you might say laws issue from. Like I suppose in science, again, obviously there's the idea that the physical world then is, you could say determined or operates by certain laws, like the law of gravity, or I don't know, the law of electromagnetism or something like that, But in like the physical way of looking at it, you could say there isn't really any such thing as a law. They just use the term, you could say, to describe like the regularities in physical, you might say, behavior or physical processes. Like you could say, well, if I let go of an apple, it will fall to the floor because of the law of gravity. But in that way of looking at it, there isn't such a thing as a law, as something that's separate from, the apple falling. The law is just a formalized kind of description, of how that how the apple falls. The law will tell you what will happen in certain circumstances. Like the law of gravity says, well, if you drop an apple, it will fall. So in that sense, the way that the science looks at it, you could say they just describe the laws is just like an artificial, you could say, description of behavior. But in the terms of the way that we were speaking about the causal, you could say, well, there is such a thing as a law or laws that is separate from behavior, and they are what you could say then determine behavior. But so you could say the causal world is like, if you want to say, like, it's like populated by that sort of level of law, you could say, or laws, like in the same way of like a blueprint, something that determines the nature of the other two worlds. But in a sense, there's no kind of experiential content there.
But is it archetypes, or am I misunderstanding?
You could say that, yeah. Again, you could say archetypes, but you'd have to speak of it in terms of, people might think of an archetype as having, like, say Jung or something. He might describe, like, what does he have, like the child or the hag? He might describe these as archetypes. But again, he's limited to using, pictorial content, image content to try to describe them. So yeah, you could say that's the realm of archetypes, but it's just in itself. There's no, like, let's say formal. There's no forms or like images. You know what I mean? There's no content like that in the causal world. But that would be the realm of archetypes. And those archetypes would then express, let's say, in the spirit world, would have some kind of spirit form, and then again, lower down than that, or continue in that process, they would then take a material expression in the physical world. But it's just like, yeah, it's hard. It's even just as the Kesdran world is kind of hard to talk about in physical language. The third world was even more removed from that, because it's like, yeah, it doesn't even have any kind of content to it in the way that we sort of know about it. And in terms of conscious, like different levels of consciousness or different kinds of consciousness, you could say that the Kesdran world is kind of based on what Matt Gurdjieff would call self-consciousness.
Mm.
But again, it's not the same kind of form of self-consciousness that we tend to experience, let's say, when we're centered in the physical world. Again, where there's this strict kind of subject-object relationship. In the physical world, I kind of experience myself as a physical body who's in relation to other bodies. But that kind of experience breaks down in the second world because there's just kind of essences which don't have a physical body. They have their own ness, but they're not like physical forms. So the form of consciousness is quite different. It's still self-consciousness, like in the sense that that you can have awareness of yourself. There is still a kind of a localization in a sense. There's a kind of you could say a point of view, and there is content that you experience in the second world. You experience these other spirit beings, which have a kind of a form, but an essence form. It's not physical form. But then, that third world would maybe tie into what he calls objective consciousness, which almost kind of looks like, comparatively, looks like an absence of consciousness. Because if I say, if I say there's no content in that third world, then the normal mind can only picture that as some kind of like void or blank. Do you see what I mean? Because it's only a normal kind of mind and mode of consciousness is only used to experiencing something. It's always a kind of form of consciousness of something. Do you see what I mean?
So it's not a void in us, it's a void in this other realm.
Well, I'm just saying that's if we say that there's no content there, that like that causal realm is kind of devoid of content, because you could say, well, if it's the realm that determines, if it's the realm that causes, then it's the realm that from which form and content, the content of experience and forms, that's the realm from which the form and content originates. So it's like in itself, you could say it can't have any form or content because that's from whence form and content come. So I'm just saying that the mind, when we maybe try to think about that, would kind of probably just sort of probably picture it as some kind of void, or absence, again, the absence of content. So he might link that
to body to go into that world. Does one develop a body for that? Is that what Gurdjieff's telling us, or we just merge into that world?
Well, again, you could say that we have these three bodies already as human beings. You could say they're part of our birthright, that we're existing in these three worlds which kind of like interpenetrate each other. But we just let's say then the bodies that we have for those three worlds, or the means that we have to sort of engage with them, are at different levels of development. The general, let's say, modern man now is only mostly developed in his physical body, in his physical consciousness. That's the side of him that's most developed, or that's the side that he spends most of his time in. So we can, again, learn, or some development can take place where we can come to more, have more experience of these other worlds. But I'm just pointing to the fact that, that sort of third world, the world of soul, then, is even more removed from our kind of, general experience, let's say, perhaps, or it's even more removed from our mind. In a sense, it's even harder to understand. Like, our mind can have some kind of conceptions, let's say, of the spirit world, because it has more in common. It's not so far removed. The spirit, you could say, the second world is only one step removed from the physical, whereas the causal, is another step, you could say, removed again, or it's even more different. So, like, when he speaks of the soul, then he often an objective consciousness. Again, that objective consciousness would have to be of a quite different form to the form of consciousness that operates in the physical world and, let's say, the Keston world. Like, again, there wouldn't be that kind of subject-object, let's say, kind of relationship, or like a consciousness experiencing a content, consciousness of something kind of operates in the first two worlds. But in objective consciousness, you could say, well, there can't be any separation between consciousness, you could say, then, and what it's consciousness of. But again, that description doesn't really make any sense, because there's no consciousness of, if there's no separation to see between objective consciousness and, let's say, content, then there isn't really an experience of content. So
a bit mind.
Yeah, the mind can only kind of imagine it as a kind of an absence, and they do talk about in certain traditions like kinds of samadhi or satori experiences that can be like a void, an absence. You see what I mean? So it's like, you know, like in our normal experience, we can drift off into, like you could say, daydream or even an absence. Like we might drift off and not even have the sense that, or remember maybe what we were dreaming about, and then we come back. You know, like maybe again, an example, I was driving the car, and maybe then, you know, at some point I cease to be aware of the car, and I'm, let's say, for all intents and purposes, I'm off in daydream, but I might come back and not even have any memory of like a daydream, you know. So you could look at that as dipping into a lower world, but the causal, going into the causal world, will be very similar to that. It's kind of the same thing, but in almost in the opposite direction. Like when we sleep is the normal level of sleep, like dropping below. I don't mean physical sleep, but what Gurdjieff calls sleep. Going into sleep is kind of an absence, but it's an unconscious absence. Whereas then going into the causal would be like, again, it would be a kind of an absence. You could say the same thing, but gone into consciously. It's hard, again, it's kind of hard to describe. So when he talks about the soul as having objective reason, you could look at that in terms of like what he says about understanding. Again, our normal perhaps idea of understanding is tied to what he would call knowledge. You know, we tend to confuse knowledge with understanding. So knowledge is always about something. You know, like I have knowledge about this subject or about, you know. So there's always that kind of, again, subject-object relationship in the realm of knowledge. It's always a knowledge of something. Whereas you could say understanding goes beyond knowledge, and it would be more like
Well, we're talking about wisdom, aren't we? We're supposed to be turning knowledge into wisdom.
yeah, you could look at like understanding or wisdom then. It would be like almost just pure action. It would be like understanding. You could say, wait, another way of trying to describe it, it would be like purely acting in such and such a fashion. Let's say then, if we talk about objective consciousness and objective reason as perhaps like that which, so to speak, knows the will of God, you know, because objective reason, you could say, well, to be objective, it has to be, let's say, real. I mean, you could say correct, but it kind of goes beyond right or wrong. But it would be like knowing the mind of God, let's say, then, you know, because you'd be, again, you go into the causal level. That's from which all the other realms, the blueprints, that's from where they, you know, they call them ideas. They're ideas in the mind of God, in the causal, and those ideas get expressed at the question in the physical world. But if you were, let's say, then acting with objective reason or pure wisdom, it would be just like purely acting in accordance, let's say, then with the will of God. But there wouldn't be any need for, like, you could say, what we normally experience as consciousness there. You know, it wouldn't be like an awareness of, oh, I'm doing the will of God. There would just be complete absorption in the doing of it. Do you see what I mean? You know?
For so many, and because I've kind of talked about this on my shows, of we're supposed to be working with the divine, with his endlessness, working with the universal laws. So
Yeah.
this would be a good thing to be able to achieve, surely.
Yeah.
Identity, though, but
yeah. Well, I mean, in a way, he talks about like sort of general sense of identity and our general experience of consciousness as, in a way, a form of limitation. You know. So yeah, it's funny how that, like, it's funny how sleep, or like you could say a lesser state of consciousness, is a kind of an absence, and then we can come out of that absence into a sort of a realm of, you know, consciousness and experience. But then if we went higher, it would be like, it's funny, it kind of becomes another mirror of the realm below, but you know, in an opposite fashion. Again, it's another kind of absence, but it's not the absence into lesser consciousness or sleep. It would be an absence into, like, yeah, you could say a higher form of consciousness, you know, or the side of you that's in a sense beyond consciousness. It doesn't require any experience at that level, but it's perfectly able to do. You see what I mean? Like the part of you, like you could say will, like there's a part of the side of man that's beyond his consciousness. You could call it will. And that's the side of him that is directly from God, you could say, or is the side that can directly, you could say, commune with God. But it's even deeper than that, because that's the point at where my will and thy will become one will, the same will.
But many people have a very weak will, which is what we're trying to work upon, strengthen our will.
Yeah. Well, that would be like, and I suppose, like he says, we can do these exercises and practices to develop our consciousness, let's say, we can become more aware of the second world, and our essence, our own particular essence, can kind of flower. And he kind of links the full maturation of that essence to like real I, which we could also link with, you know, real will. So that process can happen. It's like if the essence, if we become born or awake to the realm of the essence, then we can start receiving our own needed essence food, you know, and our life can start to mirror our essence. And if that essence kind of achieves a certain fullness, then it's possible for this kind of, you could say, higher transformation to take place that concerns like the soul, or this kind of, you know, unity of will with God. But yeah, I'm just making the point that in a sense, that third world is really, you know, it's a strange one to even try to think about, because it kind of goes beyond sort of consciousness and experience, you know, content forms as we know it, you know. Again, another word might be like conformity. In that realm, there can be like direct conformity with the will of God, but there doesn't need to be any sort of self-consciousness there who has an awareness of that. You know, you could look at it as beyond even awareness, but there's just there can be the direct doing of it, you know.
The stepping stone to get to all this really is, one starts with what we were talking about at the beginning. We look at world one, where we are in it, who we are in it, what it is, and then we can move on to world two and our understanding of that, and then on to world three. And of course, all these instructions are written for us by Mr. Gurdjieff in All and Everything.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tricky one, because again, you know, we could look at it, try to imagine it as some sort of natural process, but you could say that it's only in, let's say, world one, the physical world, and to an extent the second world, that kind of linear processes, causal processes, you know, kind of exist. You know, it's only in those first, well, that first world really, that kind of linearity exists. You know, like again, a person can, like you say, we can begin our quest and gather knowledge and try and do our work, and it's like at a certain point there could be a transformation in which you could say, become ourselves, you know, our essence, kind of, we come into our essence, in which case there's no longer that separation, you could say, between us, let's say, then, and the work. You know, the work at that point no longer becomes something that we are like, you know, practicing or trying to do, you know what I mean, as something separate to us. At that point, you kind of you're being it, you know, essence, like we say, the world of being. So in that sense, if you come into your essence, yeah, you might engage in meditations or whatever, you know, who knows what you'll do, because it'll be natural. It'll naturally arise from your essence. Do you see what I mean? There won't be any sense like of I'm doing this or that for this or that reason. It's just kind of, the essence is a bit more spontaneous. Do you see what I mean? It's a bit more like whole. You know, we can kind of come into our own wholeness where, yeah, we'll spontaneously do what we do as an expression of our own essence, you know.
Well, hopefully this show's been helpful for everyone. I'm going to bring it to a close now. I found it very mind-bending show we've done today. About, but I've struggled with these theories. Well, they're not theories, the understanding of these worlds. But if you wanted to find out anything more about my own work, check out my website, debbie-elliott.co.uk. And Josh, tell us your WordPress.
Yeah, if you type in Gurdjieff and Beelzebub as one word, like .wordpress, that should take you to the WordPress site.
Well, thank you everybody for listening. Thanks for coming on board, Josh. I'm looking forward to our next flight out into space.
Yeah, thanks for listening to me, Debbie. It's always a good fun.
Thanks, everyone. Until next time, peace and out.